Hello and welcome to Naveed for Speed. Today I am at the Glasson Lake House, courtesy of Suzuki. In fact, I came over from England on a plane, landed in Dublin and went on a road trip with Suzuki to arrive here at the Glasson Lake House, specifically to drive the Suzuki Swift Sport. So all day yesterday I've been driving this car, and today in this video I'm going to give you my first impressions and of course tell you a few of the features that I like about the car and a few of the features that I'm not too keen on. The Suzuki Swift Sport with mild hybrid looks great on paper. Its 1.4 litre Boosterjet Turbocharged engine produces 129 horsepower and 235 Newton meters of torque. This may not sound like a lot, but since it weighs just over a tonne, the Suzuki Swift Sport does 0 to 62 miles per hour in 9.1 seconds with a top speed of 130 miles per hour. In the corners is where this sporty little city car should excel. So the first thing I like about the Suzuki Swift Sport is the looks. It makes the car look really aggressive, especially if you start at the front. You get this front grille, which is different to the normal Suzuki Swift, and it just makes this car look that little bit more special. You also get a plastic trim on the bottom, which has this sort of carbon fiber weave effect, gives it a nice front splitter look. As we're moving towards the side of the car, you get a side skirt in plastic, which again has that carbon fiber look, and it just makes the car again feel more special. Looking at the alloy wheels, these wheels are 17-inch and they're specifically designed for the Suzuki Swift Sport in this design, and those wheels are flow formed, so they're not your ordinary cast wheels. They have been cast, but then they've been worked on after that as well, so they should be a bit more stronger than cast wheels as well. Moving further towards the back of the car, you can see this feature which I've seen on a lot of other hot hatchbacks as well. It gives the car a bit of a floating roofline effect, and it just makes that car look a bit more sporty again. As we move toward the right at the back of the car, you get the rear bumper with this plastic trim that again has this carbon fiber weave effect, and it makes the whole car look again a bit more special. So overall, if you look at the car, it looks like it's going to be fast, it looks like it's going to be agile. The wheelbase of the car is just 2.5 meters, so it should be an agile car. The car is just 1.5 meters high, so it sits low and it sits hunkered down, and it should be really good at attacking corners. So I'm quite excited to drive this car. Number 2 is the gearbox. Now Suzuki say that this gearbox, or this gear lever for example, has a 10% less throw than the previous Suzuki Swift Sport, and you can really feel that the gear doesn't have to travel that far, and it makes that whole experience a bit more enjoyable, a bit sporty, especially when you're in the element, especially when you're on those country roads, taking those twisty bendy roads. It's so fun. I really enjoy this gearbox, and I wish more cars did that. Number 3 is the simplicity of it, and that goes all the way through the whole of the Suzuki brand. Suzuki don't actually make any electric vehicles, they're just purely hybrid vehicles. They're the only manufacturer that make purely hybrid cars, no electric, no petrol cars. And you can see it in each car as well. Most of their cars have just one spec, and this particular car doesn't even have a sport mode. You just get in the car and it's just set up the way that it is, with its suspension, with its throttle, with its gear changes. It's just all set up to make that driving experience so much simpler. And I suppose that's why the Suzuki brand is one of the most trusted brands. In fact, it's been voted the most trusted brand in surveys 7 times this year. Why overcomplicate things when you can just make things as simple as possible? And that's what Suzuki do well, and that's why I like this car. So one of the things that I don't like about the Suzuki Swift is the boot. The boot is less than 250 litres, which is definitely behind on its competitors. But since we've came over on a plane, we only had hand luggage, we had plenty of space to fit all our luggage in the boot, and again, with a car of this size, sporty, it should be fine. Number 2 is the Android Auto. Now yesterday I tried to connect my phone using a wire to the Android Auto, and I just had so much trouble connecting it, and in the end I gave up. Maybe that is because I don't actually have a Samsung phone, I have a Huawei phone, so that might have been the reason why. But I know other people who have had no problem connecting using Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So maybe I need the car from Suzuki as a press loan so that I can conduct more research, but for now I wasn't able to connect. And the last thing that I'm not so keen on with the Suzuki Swift Sport is the steering. But more on that later. Let's go for a drive. So here we go. I'm leaving the Glasson Lake House behind me. The road trip was completed yesterday, but today I'm heading back towards Dublin Airport, and so I decided to make this video on my journey back so that I can show to you, the viewers, what this car is like to drive. Now, the first thing that I'm going to mention is this interior cabin. It's the first thing you obviously notice when you get inside the car. And of course, what sits right in front of you is the steering wheel. Now, the steering wheel looks rather quite lovely, again, especially for a car of this price. It has this sort of a perforated leather effect on it, and it has a sort of a gloss black trim and a fair few buttons for your cruise control and your infotainment controls as well. But it actually looks really premium. I know the plastics that are being used on the steering wheel and the rest of the car are the best, but again, for what you're getting for this price, it's pretty good. So the steering wheel sits in front of you with this flat bottom that makes it look premium and sporty, but the rest of the interior seems a little bit basic. I've heard criticisms of the air conditioning control, the climate control, these sort of swivel buttons, but you know what, even though again they're a bit plasticky, they're very nice to use. They're very good to touch and very easy to use as well. There's simply temperature, and there's the fan speed. You can also set the front windscreen or the rear windscreen to demist, and you can change the different modes as to your air conditioning. The infotainment system, I've not really used much of the infotainment system because I couldn't connect to the Android Auto. But the rest of the car is actually rather standard, to be honest. Like I say, Suzuki take all the confusion out of things, simplify it, and that's why I think they're a very good brand. The seats that I'm sat on are these sports bucket seats. They hug you really well. I do feel like if you are slightly larger though, they will hug you a little bit too much, but I suppose that shows that is in relation to the driving dynamics of this car. Because it's a little bit sportier, it does need to hug you into place. You might feel a little bit tight, but they are generally comfortable. Around the trim you get this sort of really cool red like fade effect in some of the plastic trim, which I thought was pretty cool. I wasn't expecting that. Right, so because this is a sporty car, we need to explore the driving dynamics, and I've had this car for quite a few hours yesterday, and I took it through the Wicklow Mountains, and it was stunning up there. But let's talk about the car and the driving dynamics of the car. Because it's a sporty car and it's got that short wheelbase, it is very agile, and it has really good stopping power because it doesn't weigh a lot. But the balance of the car is actually really good, particularly because the batteries and all of the hybrid system sits underneath the driver and passenger seats. It sits sort of in the middle, so the center of gravity is low, and it's sort of inside the wheelbase. It's towards the middle, so that means the car can turn very easily. The weight transfer is easy, and that makes a more enjoyable drive. It's probably the same reason why the steering feels so great. So as an enjoyable car, the Suzuki Swift Sport is really fun. It's a car that's you can just throw into corners if you wanted to, and you will get satisfaction from it. So the Suzuki Swift Sport, what do we have here then? We've got a 1.4 litre Boosterjet Turbocharged engine and a mild hybrid system. Together it produces 129 horsepower, and that's good for 0 to 60 mile an hour in 9.1 seconds. Now you might not think that is the fastest 0 to 60 time, but for a car of this size and a car of this weight, it certainly feels a lot faster than it actually is. The car only weighs just over 1 ton, so it's light, and with that small wheelbase, it's agile. The steering is nice and direct, it's nice and smooth, nice and light. I'm not saying you will get the best feedback on the road as to which way your wheels are facing, but the steering itself, especially when the speed gets higher, especially when the twisty bendy roads come, it is really enjoyable. And the suspension as well, the suspension is a little bit on the firmer side. It obviously has a firmer suspension than the Suzuki Swift, the standard Suzuki Swift, so you will feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's not too bad. You can use this car every day. You can use it around the city, and you can use it for longer journeys like I did yesterday. And again, that comes down to the simplicity of the car. There's no sport mode. You just get in the car and you drive it, and the car can adapt to a load of different scenarios. On the motorway or on the higher speed roads, the car will struggle a little bit with the tire noise and wind noise, but this car comes into its element when you come off the motorway, when you get into the A roads and the B roads. That's when it really comes into its element. The cabin in general, I would say it feels a little bit cramped, but in the back, there's plenty of room, especially for 3 children to sit side by sides. 2 adults can sit comfortably, a third one might have to squeeze in. But that's what I was most surprised about. The space in the back is great. And again, for a car of this size, I mentioned the dimensions earlier, that's really quite cool. The Suzuki Swift Sport, as a sporty car, it can't compare very well to some of its competitors like the Volkswagen Polo GTI or the Fiesta ST, but of course the Fiesta ST is being discontinued. So the Suzuki Swift Sport sort of is cheaper than all those cars. It's more affordable, and it offers a load more features as standard features as opposed to optional extras. So when you look at the car from that perspective, it's actually a bargain. And I think with that simplicity, Suzuki have captured a market which is, I think, a market which hasn't really been explored. A lot of car brands are focused on trying to charge more for optional extras, but with this car, you get them all as standard. So I think if you like the brand, the Suzuki brand, which is a trustworthy brand and is one of the top 10 brands in the world, you trust its reliability, then I think the Suzuki Swift Sport is a car that you should consider. It's their flagship sports model, and it's got the mild hybrid tech as well, so you can get up to 50 miles per gallon. What I've been finding on this trip is I've been getting in the high 40s, but I'm sure, you know, with a lighter foot, you can get 50 miles per gallon.
The Suzuki Swift Sport is a fun little car, in a grown-up kind of way. It probably won't be tearing up the city centre, but will provide satisfaction on a variety of roads. It may be compromised in luggage space, but which small city car isn't? With the Suzuki Swift Sport, you get decent performance, a satisfying driving experience, and great fuel economy. I don't need to tell you to buy the Suzuki Swift Sport if you were in the market for a small sporty city car, mostly because soon it may be the only car left in its class before all the fully electric cars take over. Let's hold on to this one a little bit longer.